So this is every part of my life, has been consumed with this, and there is no escape for us. We get up every day and face this, and for myself, how I face this is that I try to stop it, that I do everything within my power, within my skill set, having a particular knowledge of human rights law, and advocacy. I do everything within my skill set to fight this, and as those throughout the diaspora and within Sudan are also doing the same. It's a fight for our survival. And so there's not a question of, do you fight or do you not? We have to. The beginnings of 2023, when the period in which many of my family members were killed. That was the period in which most of my family was either forcibly displaced within camps for internally displaced, or including my father, or forcibly displaced out of Sudan if they could get out of Sudan, which I've only had a couple of relatives that have been able to leave Sudan itself, but most of my family remains, and now are starving, are experiencing suffering and starvation due to complete infrastructure collapse.
Stop me if I'm wrong. So the US is backing UAE, and they supply them with a lot of military equipments, including weapons. The same weapons are the ones that are coming to Sudan, into the RSF. And basically there's a lot of gold smuggling. So it's give me gold and I give you weapons. Am I wrong in that simple way of looking at this conflict?
No, that's exactly right. And then the UAE ultimately has interest in the RSF taking control of the land, of creating this parallel Western Sudan, government in which this militia would have political power over.
Good. Peace and blessings, everybody. I am your brother, Orina, all the way from the motherland, all the way from Kenya, Nairobi, nation's capital. And today we have a very, very, very special guest. You've seen her on Instagram, really pushing this Sudan crisis. She's really, 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 really on the forefront in this Sudan crisis. And you guys have to support this woman over here, because if you support her, you'll support Sudan. And if you support Sudan, I mean, you support Africa. What's going on in Sudan is really, really bad. Hundreds of thousands of people dead, millions are displaced, and it is something that we need to talk about. We keep on talking about Palestine, we keep on talking about Ukraine, fine. But as Africans, we should push our problems first. As Africans, we should push our problems more than we push other people's problems. And Sudan has a huge problem. And even saying the word problem is an understatement. Congo, huge problem. Somalia, huge problem. And many other parts of, but today we are focusing on Sudan. And today we have activist, humanitarian, all the way from Sudan. Really, really, I'm really, really honored to have her on Sell Afrika To Afrikans today. She's going to tell us everything about the Sudan crisis, the intensity of the problem, everything from how it began to where it is right now. And I'm really honored to have her on the show. Guys, please, please, please welcome Sister Suad Abdel Aziz. Suad, how are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Orlena, for the really flattering introduction. And I'll try my best to consolidate and speak clearly about what's going on in Sudan. something that we try to do is have narrative clarity around the most urgent topics in Sudan. So what I will, Sudan has a really rich and deep and nuanced history that I don't think I'll be able to really touch on a lot, and I don't want to touch on. I want to talk about the most pressing and urgent events and actors involved in Sudan and demands of the people. How are you
Sure.
doing?
Oh, how am I? I'm doing well. I'm doing well in spite of a lot of problems that are going on in my country. I mean, I can't even compare to what Sudan is undergoing right now. I mean, so how am I doing? I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So I think we can start with, for anyone who doesn't know, because there are many people who are watching the program right now, and they barely have an idea of what's going on in Sudan. So for the people who don't know, what is really going on in Sudan, and why is there a crisis right now?
Yeah. So first off, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Suad. I'm the executive director of an advocacy collective of Sudanese women called Decolonize Sudan, and we are focused on providing an anti-imperialist education and advocacy around Sudan. And myself, I'm a human rights attorney based in the U.S. I came from Sudan as a refugee, and most of my family remains, as do most of the organizers within our collective. Most of our families are remaining in Sudan and struggling to survive. Concisely, what's going on in Sudan is a colonial siege. It is a foreign-backed militia is seizing land and resources on behalf of their foreign backers, and extracting these resources for profit. This militia, which is called the Rapid Support Forces, is now trying to annex the west of Sudan. They're attempting to create, cut the west of Sudan from, which includes Darfur, Kordofan, and the Nuba Mountains. So this is the huge, chunk of Sudan, and it is the most resource-rich areas within Sudan. So there's a very obvious, reasoning as to why they are trying to take control of these particular regions. If they were to succeed in doing this, which they will not, under the mobilization and the activism of all of the Sudanese people fighting back against this, we will ensure that this will not happen. But if they were to succeed in doing this would not only destabilize the whole of Sudan, but it would destabilize the region, which if a militia were to be able to take control of a land and be a governing force through a genocide and through an ethnic cleansing campaign, this would wreak havoc on the entirety of the continent. So what's currently happening in Sudan should be of major concern to all of those throughout the continent, and all Pan-Africans and those who stand in solidarity with African people. So I'll back up a little bit. So our previous president, Omar Al-Bashir, was widely disliked. He was an extremely corrupt leader. He engaged in a lot of mismanagement of resources and really weakened Sudan's infrastructure in order to enrich himself. And he himself took power within a military coup. This is kind of this was a trend in Sudan's post-colonial history of leaders taking power through military coup. And so he sought to, well, on one hand, he sought to coup-proof himself, to prevent a military coup to overthrow himself. And on the other hand, there was this resource-rich area of Darfur that he sought to extract resources from. And those within Darfur were extremely resistive to his rule. So he sought to suppress those within the west of Darfur, the west of Sudan in particular, Darfur, and he sought to prevent any type of future coup against himself. And so what he did is he formed this alliance of militias, of previously disconnected regional militias. He brought them together within this alliance, and he called it the Janjaweed. And the Janjaweed acted essentially as, and he poured the resources into the Janjaweed as opposed to the military, so that he would have a stronger kind of defense force against his own military if a coup were to ever take place. And the Janjaweed terrorized those within Darfur in particular, but the Janjaweed acted as his kind of personal guard, his personal, he would enlist the Janjaweed in campaigns to massacre and to especially suppress any type of resistance. And this is kind of how the Janjaweed operated. In one of the main, so someone who worked his way up within the Janjaweed is Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemedti. And he worked his way up until he became kind of this high-ranking fighter within the Janjaweed. And in 2014, he decided to create his own private militia force. And this was the Rapid Support Forces. He enlisted most of his fighters within the Janjaweed, within that force. And so this was a new private militia force that was made up of almost entirely Janjaweed fighters. And he engaged in the business of privatizing this mercenary militia force. He was hired by Saudi Arabia to, this militia, the Rapid Support Forces, was then contracted by Saudi Arabia to, and by the U.A.E. jointly, to massacre Yemeni people, whom, they suspected to be Houthis, Houthi rebels. And the Rapid Support Forces in 2016 was contracted by the European Union to act as mercenary border patrol to kill any migrants that were trying to make their way into Italy. There were multiple instances of them being then subsequently hired as mercenary border patrol, which is really relevant right now because a same type of trend is going on in Libya. This rising militia there is being hired by the EU to kill migrants at trying to get to the border. So this trend of privatized militias kind of getting increased power, and even more power than the states in which they are, is really concerning and should be, again, of concern to all those within the African continent and beyond. So he's contracted by many entities. He's contracted by the Libyan former military commander Haftar to massacre Libyan people that were protesting. So the Rapid Support Forces is beginning to a lot of its wealth is from this beginning stages, from 2014 onward, was amassed through their privatization of this militia force and being used throughout the Middle East, throughout North Africa, and also, also contracted by the EU. And so Hemedti is starting to, grow his forces. He starts to bring in mercenaries from abroad to join, this private force that he's made. And meanwhile, there were protests happening against Bashir's corrupt regime in 2019 in Sudan. The protests actually had started as a group of trade unions were protesting against increased prices and for better wages. So they initially started as standard, as protests around standards of living, and this is when the Bashir hired the RSF as his private security, particularly for his palace, his presidential palace. And the RSF begins to massacre protesters, because this is the reasoning behind enlisting a militia versus a military force. That a militia is not having to follow any type of domestic or international regulations. There's a black hole in legal regulations around private entities. So this is, the reason why the EU is enlisting militias and not its own navy to, kill migrants, because they know that they would have to answer to domestic and international laws in doing so. And the protests then, especially after many young boys within the protests start getting disappeared, getting killed, and people start disappearing. The protests shift into protests around ousting Bashir, and this becomes the primary demands in 2019 and onward. The Bashir again enlists the RSF to massacre protesters in one night, which was the last night of Ramadan at the time. The RSF, along with military forces, massacred all of those young men and boys who were within the square, the town hall square. And this was one of the bloodiest days of the protests, and things really start to amp up from there. Throughout Sudan, there start to be widespread protests against Bashir that really come to the surface. And eventually, Bashir is ousted within a coup. And this coup took place. The military, the thing that he was trying to prevent with the creation of the Janjaweed, ended up happening. He was overthrown within a military coup, and he was put in, a prison at the time. But then he is now living in exile somewhere. So that's what happened with Bashir. No one knows where he is. Which is just a shame. He needs to be held accountable, and so the military has now taken over within this coup. Most people are opposed to this the military kind of taking power within this time, and they demand civilian-led governance. They, we celebrated the ousting of Bashir, but we demanded, okay, we do not want another Bashir. We do not want Burhan, who's the head of the military, to be now, take power. We want our own civilian-led governance. We want representative governance. And people took to the streets, and resistance committees, which were these, political kind of organizations that had formed, came together and put these demands together within revolutionary charters, demanding that the military go back to the barracks, that the military be a fighting force and not a force of executive governance, that we want civilian-led governance, and this is, how we want it to happen. And the military signs an agreement with at the time, actually, it was with Hamdok, who I would encourage you to check out our page and our resources, which is decolonizasudan.org. We have many resources, including articles about Hamdok. This is a figure that we could talk about for a long time, but Hamdok is this person who was part of Bashir's regime that now kind of comes up and says that he's a representative of civilians in Sudan. And especially in this time when he signed this agreement with the military, saying that, we're formalizing the military governance up until 2023. April 16th of 2023, to be precise, is when the military would hand over power to the civilians. But Hamdok was widely seen as a traitor for doing this, that we want, civilian-led governance now. We do not want to, allow the military to subsume power and assume governance. And so this agreement is put forth that April 16, 2023, power would shift into, there would be a process for civilian-led governance to be to take power. And the day before, April 15, 2023, the RSF takes over all key military bases in Sudan, completely, within a matter of months, levels Khartoum. For the first time ever in Sudan's history, Khartoum is invaded and attacked, and sets the takes the RSF in this day, in the months following, really form a siege on Sudan, taking control of much of Sudan. This is the period in which most the RSF terrorizes the civilians. They target mainly civilians and civilian infrastructure. They destroyed at this period all of the main hospitals, destroyed schools, destroyed all main sources of food and clean water, including all the grain facilities, and so really seek to completely level and destroy infrastructure throughout Sudan. This wasn't just contained to one region. They're in this campaign to seize the entirety of the country, and this is the period in which most 1/3 of the population is forcibly displaced, which is 16 million people. There are massacres throughout the country that I think the numbers now are about 1 million people were killed. It was 800,000, and that's the reported numbers, and that's not even from sickness due to the healthcare collapse. That's not due to the starvation of the intentional famine that the RSF assumed throughout Sudan. that's direct deaths from massacres. And so this is the deadliest period in Sudan's history. Is especially the year following the RSF siege in 2023. And at this period, everyone was confused. We were our whole lives, had changed essentially overnight. And we, because this was the RSF was seen as this kind of fringe militia, private militia force, and how people were trying to wrap our heads around how did this fringe militia force take over the country, destabilize the country in a matter of months. How were they able to do that, and how were they able to overtake the national military? And we now know, looking back through UN documentation, through journalistic documentation, that the United Arab Emirates was the main source of funding, of weapons, of fighters, and of backing to this militia. And they had been coordinating much prior to April of 2023. And Hemedti actually had been meeting with U.S. officials, the U.S. envoy, days before the siege took place, met with Israeli intelligence leading back to 2019, and so was coordinating with various foreign entities and really establishing that he was going to do this, establishing himself as a force that would try to take over Sudan, so as some type of diplomatic force, so now we understand that this militia wasn't acting alone. It was entirely made possible by this very wealthy Gulf nation called the United Arab Emirates. And we also have resources on our site getting into the history of the United Arab Emirates if you're interested in that, and its creation and kind of its motivations. But to sum up, its main motivation in Sudan is land and resources, is to have continuous access to the smuggling of gold, of other minerals. Sudan is also, especially the West, is also rich in uranium, which is used in, is the key mineral for nuclear reactors, and also it's about the UAE is in a battle for land, for agricultural resources, because the UAE itself is a desert, and so most of its food imports have come from Sudan, and so control of land and control of resources is vital in keeping this sub-empire of the UAE alive, and so this is they utilize this kind of power vacuum period of where Sudanese people had risen up against our leadership. We were, discontent with our leadership, to flood resources, money, and weapons into this militia force to be able to do this takeover. So this is why I always call it plain and simple a colonial siege, and entities like where I'm at, the U.S., are not at all innocent in this. The UAE is the U.S.'s main, one of the U.S.'s main allies in the Middle East. There's no way that the UAE would not do anything without the U.S.'s green light. And there's also very something I've been learning a lot about lately. There's a huge UAE lobbying groups within the U.S. It's $1 trillion lobbying branch. So the UAE, and the US are extremely close allies. And the US is the main arms provider to the UAE. With the understanding that the UAE is providing those arms to the RSF. And from 2023 onward, the US has only increased the arms supplies to the UAE. So this is really key for those within the American diaspora, is the call to end the flow of arms to the UAE, contingent upon its support of this genocidal militia. And one thing that you mentioned is that about the Palestine and popular support for Palestine. Well, one thing that we can't escape is that our fates are linked. Whether we like it or not, our fates are linked. In the main arms suppliers that are going to the UAE are the main arms suppliers providing Israel with arms. So our boycotts and our disruption of arms providers are linked. We have the same, and I think that's something that needs to be emphasized, especially amongst Palestinian activists, is that when we're fighting this arms supply that's coming from the US, we're also fighting the arms supply that's causing the Sudanese genocide. And I think that's something that we really need to emphasize more as activists and organizers here in the US. But yeah, is what else would I like to mention here? So the narrative campaigns, because this is something that a lot of our work is centered around, is clarifying the narrative around Sudan. That there's this narrative that Sudan is kind of an internal civil war, that the military and the RSF are the same entity, and that they're just kind of clashing because of personal clashes, because Burhan and Hemedti don't like each other, and that's kind of the narrative. We've been able to fight back against the fighting military factions language very effectively, reiterating that the RSF is a militia. It is not a military. And when you call it a military, you're saying that it has power to take over a country. So that's really dangerous, And so we've been able to, now more and more people are finally using the language of militia, genocidal militia, and emphasizing that the RSF is not a military force. It is a business enterprise owned and operated by its CEO, the Hemedti. And by the way, Hemedti has now become the richest man in Sudan, due to particularly his the gold extraction to the UAE, and most of his companies are based within the UAE itself. And so emphasizing that this is about profit, that this is not some type of ethnic tribal warfare, that it is central to all of this is the extraction of resources and of land for profit. So being very clear about these narratives is something that we've centered a lot of our work around, especially because there is mass disinformation campaigns around Sudan. And part of that is just lazy journalism, but a large part of it is the market, the millions of dollars, the billions of dollars that have gone into marketing and PR from the RSF and the UAE. We learned very early on that the RSF contracted an Israeli PR and international relations company called Dickinson Madsen, and this company was really vital in creating this civil war narrative of obfuscating the RSF's role and subsequently obfuscating the UAE's role, which now the UAE itself has deployed a mass marketing campaign kind of justify their involvement in Sudan through a framework of fighting terrorism. And they're saying that the military and the state of Sudan are Islamist terrorists, and so we are actually invested in the well-being of Sudanese people in backing this militia, because we're trying to fight Islamist terrorism in Sudan. And so this has been a new, an emerging narrative that has caught on, and the U.S. has accepted this narrative formally within terrorism designations of key Sudanese authorities and Sudanese resistance figures to the RSF, and designating these individuals broadly as terrorists. We suspect that these designations will continue, and that the U.S. will continue to focus on trying to destabilize through this kind of, middleman mediation peace process of trying to bring in the UAE, trying to bring in the RSF as a real political entity that can be negotiated with for territory. And the UAE is at the helm of these talks, despite their backing of this militia force. And so we have a lot of work on our hands to fight these narratives that are very intentionally obfuscating, confusing what's going on in order to ultimately allow the RSF to take power.
Wow. Let me tell you something, Suad. You've just told us everything that's going on there. And if there's anybody who hasn't understood, sorry, if there's anybody who didn't know, I'm sure by now they have an idea of what's going on. So thank you so much for that summary, if I can say, about what's happening in Sudan. So if I can, stop me if I'm wrong. So the US is backing UAE, and they supply them with a lot of military equipments, including weapons. The same weapons are the ones that are coming to Sudan, into the RSF. And basically there's a lot of gold smuggling. So it's give me gold and I give you weapons. Am I wrong in that simple way of looking at this conflict?
No, that's exactly right. And then the UAE ultimately has interest in the RSF taking control of the land, of creating this parallel Western Sudan, government in which this militia would have political power over, which is, by the way, unthinkable. I want to emphasize what they're currently, because this is very important, what they're currently doing in Darfur and in El-Fasher in particular. So El-Fasher was meant to is one of the the main the most populated city in Darfur. It's one of the key one of the last key areas that the RSF must take over in order to set this parallel government plan into place. And so what they're doing in El-Fasher, they've laid out their plan that they're going to take control of El-Fasher. They've previously said that El-Fasher was going to be the capital of this parallel government, but now they're saying Niala, which is near El-Fasher. But they need El-Fasher in order to set this plan into motion. And what they're doing in El-Fasher is an extermination campaign. It is in every level one of the most I'm a human rights lawyer. I work with victims directly in some of the most in some of the most dangerous areas of state terror, and have heard many things. But what we're hearing out of El-Fasher is something that is just unthinkable. They've created a kill box around El-Fasher, which is a physical borders to prevent any civilians from leaving, and of course from anyone from coming in, and they are starving out the population. They have months, 2 months ago, people were eating only animal feed throughout Al-Fasher, and the mayor of Al-Fasher came out within a public statement and said, we're running out of animal feed, and our people are going to die, are going to be dying soon, and we're seeing the beginnings of many of those deaths from stage 5 famine throughout Al-Fasher. The RSF is not allowing any aid to come in, and in fact, they've threatened the UN with that if the UN sends air drops of aid, then the RSF has threatened that they will shoot down the UN planes. And this is the kind of militia that we're talking about. This is not a diplomatic force. This is and still it boggles my mind. I still struggle to understand why the international community is maintaining the narrative around civil war here, when it's very clear what's going on. Within El-Fasher itself, people are experiencing all levels of terror. Women and young girls, young boys and men even, are experiencing sexual abuse and complete sexual slavery. There were accounts of people having raping the children in front of the parents, and then killing the parents, and then and then killing the children after that. All types of really atrocious things are happening in El-Fasher, and they're happening in in darkness, because the telecommunications are being blocked so that people cannot broadcast what's happening to them. Journalists that exist within Al-Fasher, like Muammar Ibrahim, are being targeted, and many journalists, many of the main journalists that are within Al-Fasher have been killed, and or kidnapped, disappeared. So all of this that's happening, it's important to frame it as, it's not just it's not a mindless kind of terror that's happening. They're intentionally killing and annihilating this population in order to take control of the land, because this would set about its plan of having control of the west of Sudan. And it's really important to frame it this way, because I think people emphasize the humanitarian concerns, they emphasize the deaths and the abuses, but they don't emphasize why the RSF is doing this, and therefore we're not fighting why this is happening, the cause of the root cause of this. And it's really quite infuriating for me to continuously, because the humanitarian work is needed, but the political advocacy in order to stop this, I've not seen the same levels of enthusiasm for that, and I'm still a bit confused as to why we're not mobilizing to end the siege, to end the flow of arms in order to dissolve the RSF, because we can do this. If there's an international campaign to stop this, and we're very clear about what our demands are, we can do this. I'm certain of it. So I don't know if it's a lack of political motivation, or or certain desires for this for the RSF to in fact continue this. I'm not sure. Yeah, and that's something that I've been struggling with.
Wow, wow, and you know, one thing I've realized about you, Sister Suad, is that I've been watching your videos, and even we talked about this before we started. I see the passion, I see the conviction in the way you speak about this Sudan conflict. Uh, I guess my question is, where does where does the passion come from? Because I know you love Sudan, but where does the emotion come from? I mean, if you're willing to talk about it, is it as a result of, you know, your family being there and your family actually, you know, witnessing what's going on over there firsthand? I mean, where does the conviction come from?
Yeah, I mean, Sudan is my home. I always intended to to leave the U.S. and eventually come home, and like my story is not unique. This is this story of most Sudanese people throughout the world. The diaspora currently is their whole lives are being completely turned upside down, and there is it feels as if we're screaming into a void at times, and particularly within the beginnings of 2023, when the period in which many of my family members were killed. That was the period in which most of this initial destruction was taking place. Most of my family was either forcibly displaced within within camps for internally displaced, or including my father, or through forcibly displaced out of Sudan if they could get out of Sudan, which I've only had a couple of relatives that have been able to leave Sudan itself, but most of my family remains, and now are starving, are experiencing suffering and starvation due to complete infrastructure collapse. So this is every part of my life. Has been consumed with this, and there is no escape for us. We get up every day and face this, and for myself, how I face this is that I try to stop it, that I do everything within my power, within my skill set, having a particular knowledge of human rights law, and advocacy. I do everything within my skill set to fight this, and as those throughout the diaspora and within Sudan are also doing the same. It's a fight for our survival. And so there's not a question of, do you fight or do you not? We have to. Yeah, that's where it comes from for me.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I mean, I told you this before we started recording, and I'll still tell you again. I want to say thank you for what you're doing, because you are really standing up for your people, and you're using your area of expertise. See, that's what I like. You're using your area of expertise, and you're using the skills that you have to actually fight for your people, and you are doing it. So, I just want to say thank you, thank you so much. I mean, and I just want to say sorry, for your family and for what they're going through. I wish them all the best. Now, and I'd like everybody who's watching here to actually pray for their safety. And I'll, from now on, start praying for their safety, because it's tough. What these people are doing is horrible. I mean, hundreds of people dead, millions of people displaced, and nobody's talking about it. I mean, we're busy talking about all these irrelevant things that are going on in pop culture and all these things, and we're not talking about Sudan. We're not talking about what's going on with the RSF, getting money from yeah, getting weapons from the UAE, and the UAE being supported by the US. So it's this triangle that's going on right now. US, UAE, Sudan, US, UAE, Sudan. So it's this triangle that's going. I mean, like, and we're not talking about it. So I really, really want everybody here to really, really start talking about it. But that's one thing that I want to ask you. How can people really support this cause? How can people really support this cause? How can people from wherever they are support this cause?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that Sudanese people do not want help. We want an end to the foreign meddling, for the foreign
Yeah,
meddling to stop, because this is, the foreign meddling stops, then we can start to then the RSF dissolves and we can start to rebuild. And so for those throughout diaspora in particular, um, emphasizing where you're at, looking into how the country that you're in may be complicit in that. For those within the U.S. and the U.K., our governments are actively, the U.S. in particular is providing arms to the U.A.E. But the U.K. has been diplomatically supporting the U.A.E. through peace talks, what they're calling peace talks, and so emphasizing and challenging where you're at, how your country is complicit in this. Within Kenya, I brought up earlier the Kenyan lawyer who brought the case in the Kenyan Supreme Court against how the Kenyan government has been complicit in its support of the RSF, and how he brought this in particular right after the RSF was hosted in Nairobi in an announcement of the parallel government, and the the Kenyan government legitimized this, and so that lawyer and any activists that are fighting within Kenya against their state's complicity is doing a really impactful thing. Um, we have a couple of resources on our website. It's decolonizesudan.org. We have a list of action items. Many of these action items are particular to audiences within the U.S., but there are many that are applicable elsewhere. Within the U.S., there is a UAE arms embargo that is being called for, and that is active within legislation, is pending legislation within the House and Senate, and so supporting initiatives like this, challenging the arms supply in particular. Trying to halt the arms supply is really vital in this time. I think the biggest way in which, besides supporting mutual aid initiatives, because like I also said earlier, there is no meaningful support from any state for humanitarian aid within Sudan, especially in this time of starvation, of a lot of need within Sudan. It is communities are surviving based almost solely upon the mutual aid that's being provided by diaspora, doing grassroots funding work, and so helping with mutual aid campaigns. But for me, the most important thing that viewers can do is challenging the narrative, is being very clear about the narrative around Sudan. It's a fight, it's a siege of land and of resources for profit, and it is not a civil war. And the demands around the most urgent demands of ousting the RSF need to be highlighted, and the delegitimization of this militia, this genocidal militia force, we need to emphasize this. And so calling it a civil war, you are playing into the legitimacy of the RSF, of calling this genocidal militia force a force of governance and a military force. And so challenging these narratives, being very clear about the narrative of what's going on, and educating your friends, your family, your community members. Feel free to use our resources. We have plenty of them. Again, we have a whole team of researchers, of writers that have compiled these resources. So I urge you to use our resources and share them, in order to be clear about the narrative.
Wow. Yeah. I'll put the link in the I'll put the website on the screen. That's decolonizeafrica.org, right?
Decolonizesudan.org.
Sorry, decolonizesudan.org. Sorry,
But we want to decolonize Africa. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The goal. The goal is trust me. I speak about it every day. But Suad, if there's one thing that made me, that made me sick to my stomach about this Sudan conflict, is when I saw that young lady hanging from a tree, and she was just swinging over there, and I think it was a RSF militia member filming it. I was like, what is this? I couldn't believe what I was seeing. What was going through your mind the first time you saw that? I couldn't believe it, and I think that's when I was like, okay, this is no, this has to stop immediately.
Yeah. What was going through my mind is that this is one documented case, because he happened to film, this RSF fighter happened to film himself. He was proud of what he was doing, and hanging and killing this young Black woman. And this is the documented case. How many more undocumented cases aren't we seeing? This is happening in the dark. This is what the scary part is that this is what we're seeing is one small piece of what's happening. Within the past couple of days, reports have come out about how UAE drones were used to gas, to put in a poisonous gas throughout, particularly like civilian areas, civilian markets. And now there are reports of people dying from this gas, from people seizing and being extremely ill and or dying from this gas. So they're literally keeping this besieged population, they're blockading them from food, they're terrorizing them daily, and now they're gassing this population. And and this is what we know. This is the information that we know, and there's so much more that we don't know, and we may not know until decades to come. But I think it needs to be more alarming to people, that this is not going to be isolated. That also this is a mission to take control of this region in order to take control of a larger West Sudan, and in order to destabilize a larger, the larger continent. That this is not going to be an isolated. This militia is not operating in isolation. It's going to affect us all, and it is affecting us all. Even if you don't care about the population that is being terrorized and killed, at least understand that this is not going to be. This is not isolated. That and that we have to we are forced to collectively fight against this militia, because it's going to affect you. It's going to affect me, whether it has or hasn't yet.
Yeah. Wow. it, I was immediately disgusted when I saw that video, and I was even more disgusted to see that we are just not paying close attention to this. you know and I think my next question is there hope? Is there hope? Is it getting worse, and is there hope? Because I've been following Sudan for a very long time. I remember when Janjaweed was in its prime, so to speak. And to see it morph into RSF. I mean, is there hope? Is there hope in this? And is it getting worse?
Yeah, I mean that should be the lesson for us all, is that we that if we had stopped the Janjaweed from terrorizing the people of Darfur, that we would not now have a completely destabilized, almost stateless country. And so whether there is, we need to start thinking about how all of these things are connected. That these people being starved in Al-Fasher will come for Kenya, will come for this our fates are very connected here, in extremely tangible ways. And so there's hope because of the organizing power, because of the grassroots campaigns. For me, what gives me a lot of hope is that is one around all of the mutual aid campaigns. How very quickly our people were able to come together, to organize within Sudan and outside of Sudan, to fight for the survival of our people, and how effectively we've been able to do that. And if we put an ounce of our power that we've been putting into and our attention that we've been putting into the humanitarian concerns, into political advocacy, I have no doubt that very quickly we would see that the end of this genocidal siege. We would see the dissolving of this militia. And so my hope is in people power, and my work is in having hope in people power, and is in mobilizing people. And so I very much see we will see a liberated Sudan very soon. And when we see that liberated Sudan, we will be able to create representative governance. We will be able to rebuild our infrastructure. And I have full faith in us to be able to do that, because I love my people, and my people are capable of so much. And we've seen that play out. Yeah.
Yeah, trust me, you don't even have to. I mean, I can see the love just by looking at you and just by listening to you. I mean, I see it, and I was very, very impressed by the love you have. Because every video, well, not every, but some actually, like, yeah, the videos that I've seen from Decolonize Sudan, from your page, are very emotional, and that's how I know that this level of passion and this level of love is coming from a right place. So again, Suad, I want to say, keep on doing what you're doing, because if it's not you, then who? You know, I mean, if it's not for people like you, then who are going to stand up for the people of Sudan? Because what's going on is catastrophic. And let me say this: I don't support this Kenyan government, and I don't support what they were, them, kind of legitimizing RSF. I don't support them doing that. And I want the people of Sudan, even who are watching this program, to know that majority of Kenyans are not behind this shady government that we have right now. So, because people will start saying that you Kenyans are legitimizing RSF, but it's not that, because if you look at the statistics, if you look at what's going on right now, If you look at the polls and everything, majority of Kenyans are not behind this government. So I fully disagree with what our government did. But by the way, Suad, I just want to ask you one thing is that with all these things that are going on with RSF and with the millions of people being displaced and with thousands of is there an exact number of people? Because I googled today and it's 150,000 people, and some people are saying 800,000 people. Is there a reason why there's no exact number of people who have been killed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the 150 has remained 150 for over a year now, even though we know that there were massacres of 300,000 people in Zamzam. The RSF massacred over the hundreds of thousands of people. So the 150 is coming from UN agencies, and UN agencies and the main NGOs that were responsible for human rights documentation in Sudan were Western, white-led, non-Sudanese-led NGOs. And in 2023, when the RSF the RSF siege began, these NGOs all retreated from Sudan because they were not from there. They were not, and so as soon as there was danger, they retreated, which you could, talk about the ethics of that, but ultimately I think they're not from there, so they're not going to remain. I think there needs to be a structural change of our and this is a huge reason why Decolonize Sudan was created, is organizations led by us for us, rather than led by these NGOs, people who come in and have no context of what's happening, that impose certain initiatives and then leave. And so, long story short, there's a lack of documentation, of official documentation of human rights abuses, and that's due to the NGOs and the UN entities retreating. We're finally seeing some UN entities come back into Port Sudan, but large NGOs have not begun operations throughout the majority of Sudan yet, and of course are not operating within the West in Darfur. So there's a lack of documentation, and there's a lack of official documentation. So whenever we see numbers around Sudan, always understand that number is probably 10 times more, if at least, that due to the lack of documentation, due to the complete infrastructure destruction of the telecommunications system by the RSF. There is even a lack of people being able to document their own atrocities and broadcast their own what's happening to them. So always understand that any documented numbers are much more inflated than you see around Sudan.
Boycott UAE. I've seen that hashtag, boycott UAE. How can people effectively boycott UAE so that it can, it can kind of cripple UAE? And when you cripple UAE, you basically cripple the RSF, because that's where they get their weapons, and that's how the gold for weapons trade happens. How can people effectively boycott the UAE?
Yeah, the UAE should be treated as a pariah state. Any to the UAE, including to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, do not engage in tourism. Much of their profit comes from tourism, but the majority of their profits come from gold. This is their main export, even though they don't have a single gold mine. So the boycotting of Dubai gold is really essential here. We have created a boycott list of the main UAE gold suppliers at decolonizesudan.org/boycott UAE. That's our list of companies that are involved. And within the US and the UK, we mapped connections. If you're interested in your country to act as a researcher for us to map your country's connections to these companies, please reach out to us, because we would love to have additional research power to be able to do that. But look out for those main gold, UAE gold that's coming out of the UAE, and those main companies that we've highlighted. And I think like the largest thing, the effect of the Boycott UAE international campaign has been around the narrative shift, around treating the UAE as a pariah state that is supporting genocide, that is not only supporting but orchestrating genocide. Is really the narrative, and the emphasis of this has been really strong.
Wow. Hey, by the way, let me say, this is a teachable moment for me. I had of course, I knew the basics of what's going on in Sudan, but you've really broken down what's really going on. And I'm really happy, and I hope people are really learning. And I want people to really learn so that we can do our part in helping, this Sudan conflict to end, because I really want it to end. It's brutal. It's brutal, and so one thing that I liked from one of your videos is you said that the U.S. is a public mediator and a private instigator. Well, because I really have a lot of U.S. citizens who watch my show, and they would really like to know what that means in this Sudan conflict.
Yeah, I mean, in every manner. So the U.S. is, their public position around Sudan has been that yes, there's a genocide happening. But who knows who's responsible for the genocide? It's kind of a civil war, and in order for us to solve this, we need to facilitate peace talks, and we need to bring in the RSF to have negotiations of territorial control as a governance entity, and we need to bring the UAE in particular. In all of these talks, the UAE is brought in as one of the main entities of the negotiating entities, and so bringing in the genocide heirs and their backers to these peace talks is in itself extremely destructive. But in every U.S. policy around Sudan has been directly contributing to the genocide, whilst they're publicly saying we're trying to make peace. But the policies are, we're going to increase the weapons imports to the UAE. We understand that our weapons are going to the RSF because we're the main weapons providers to the UAE, and that is in turn the main weapons provider to the RSF. We're going to increase the weapons supplies since 2023. Has only been increased by billions of dollars. In particular, Trump's own private corporations have. He's enriching himself through his private corporations within these UAE weapons deals as well. But that's another conversation. We're going to do in the middle of the largest forced displacement on earth today. We're going to add Sudan to the immigration red list, saying that this is a terrorist nation and therefore immigrants are banned. Immigrants are banned from legally taking refuge within the U.S. So blocking any immigration within the largest forced displacement. The U.S. imposed unilateral sanctions on Sudan in 2024. In the midst of mass starvation, U.S. sanctions, as we highlight within our website and our resources, affect civilians first. They destabilize the economy, especially because the U.S. is one of the main providers of humanitarian aid, has historically been the main provider of humanitarian aid to Sudan. The U.S. pulled all of this aid, of course, with the U.S. aid, with the cutbacks of U.S. aid. So in the midst of starvation, you completed unilateral sanctions to skyrocket prices in Sudan, banned migrants from coming in the midst of the largest forced displacement, cut all humanitarian aid that Sudan has been dependent on for decades due to the U.S. wanting to control Sudan's foreign policy through humanitarian aid, and of course increase the weapons supply. So all policies point to support of the destabilization and of this genocide. And then publicly they're saying they want peace. And what peace means is we make peace with the RSF and allow this genocidal militia to take territorial control and political power. So the U.S. is it has been one of the main forces that are complicit in this genocide, and that needs to be emphasized, especially for those within the U.S. To be fighting back against this.
Wow. And I think the good thing you've said today is, I think the line that I like that you've said today is, as much as far as much as people are donating and doing all the humanitarian work, we need to, the same energy that you're using in humanitarian work, use it in political, in political organization, and putting a lot of pressure politically on the UAE and on the RSF. So, because by the way, that's very true. All I'm seeing is humanitarian work, and very, very, I'm not seeing a lot of intensity on the political side of this of this Sudan conflict. I'm not seeing that much intensity on putting so much pressure on the UAE, putting so much pressure on on the RSF. And by the way, I'm really disappointed in African leadership because I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that help. I mean, I don't know if you're seeing it. I mean, I know you follow this issue more than most of us. African leaders really pouring their help to stop this conflict?
No, not at all. And then, in fact, African leaders and North African leaders are they stop migrants from coming to the border in the midst of the forced, this forced. How cruel is that? Is that not only is there like political advocacy against this and political pressure against this militia force to support kind of a stable Sudan, but then there's a cutting of any type of migration into the bordering countries, in particular Egypt, but also Ethiopia. Limiting the levels of migration, or totally cutting migration from those that are escaping genocide to neighboring countries. So it's extremely that has been very, very, very cruel. I've only seen a lot of cruelty come from the African leadership.
Well, Thank you so much for coming, Suad. How can people wait before? Okay, before you can give your last word. Is there any piece of information that we haven't, uncovered so far before you give your last word? Because I really want people to support Sudan. I'm really passionate about this because Sudan is actually not far. Because okay, we don't share a border with the Sudan we're talking about. We share a border with South Sudan, but it's still, it's still not far. Sudan is just our neighbor, and to see that Kenyans are not paying attention to this, I mean, not only Kenyans, but a significant amount of Africans is, it's just disappointing. So, is there any piece of information that Suad you'd like to tell us about this conflict in Sudan?
Yeah, I think just the most urgent demands are around ending the siege in El-Fasher, are around having aid drops, calling for aid drops, urgent and emergency aid drops to El-Fasher, to the starving population within, to end the RSF's siege on the west of Sudan that it has now attempted to take control of, to boycott the U.A.E in order to do so, to cut the weapons supply, and organize against and mobilize against the supply of weapons going into the RSF. These are, and of course, being very clear and demanding within our language around Sudan, having very clear narratives and demands. And if you'd like to, we have larger narrative guides and language guides for strategic appeals within our website. Again, decolonizesudan.org. We have a lot there. I hope you can check it out. And I hope that it is helpful for you in your journey to educate and organize yourself around Sudan.
Oh, wow. What are the last words you'd like to leave us before we close? And guys, please support decolonizesudan.org. Where can people find you, Suad, on social media?
It's just at Decolonize Sudan on Instagram, and we have a YouTube page as well. And I just want to say thank you, Ordina, for making the time and for having a really thoughtful, engaging discussion with me, for supporting and platforming Decolonize Sudan's work, and for having these platforming these larger conversations around Sudan, like you're doing with Ahmed and other activists and speakers. What you're doing is really important, and it needs to be done more, especially independent journalism and platforming of what's going on in Sudan.
The good thing about us independent platforms is that we are not bought. So we tell these stories the way they are on the ground. These big corporations are not, well, at least me, I'm not bought. So I'll say the truth the way it is. So hey, Suad, thank you so much. Please, guys, support decolonizesudan.org. I'll put your social media platforms on the screen, and let's try as much as we can to decolonize Sudan, boycott UAE, and also hold US accountable, because they're also playing a big role in this conflict. Go to decolonizesudan.org, look at the action points, and try to act on them according to the best of your ability. You can be, all of us have different capabilities, but even as far as much as we have our different capabilities, let's use our capabilities, as weak or as strong as they are, to support Sudan. You guys have heard Suad. You've heard our families over there, and I know Suad, you are really praying for them every day. So, as far as much as we'd like to give up humanitarian aid, we need to also organize politically and support Sudan. And also pray for Sudan. We keep on pray for Ukraine, pray for Palestine, but this is African problems require African solutions, and African problems require African people to enforce those African solutions. So we also need to pray for Sudan. And hey, Suad, thank you so much. Hey, if you this show is open for you. You want to come again to the show and tell us critical information or update us on what's going on. Personally, I would like to have you again so that you can update us on what's going on with this Sudan conflict.
Thank you so
Because
much.
we really need to know what's going on.
Thank you. Just really quick, because I think this connects to your last point about so I'm Muslim, and we have a saying that that if you cannot so the first thing that you need to do is change. If when you see an wrongdoing, when you see injustice and oppression, you change it with your actions. You try to change it with your actions. And if you can't change it with your actions, then you speak on it. And this speaks to the narrative part. You speak very clearly on it. And if you can't speak on it, then you pray for people. And you can do all of these things concurrently, but there's an obligation for us to act first, to speak, and then to pray. And this is this is really important, because if we have power and an ability to act on something, we should. I would just call on people to be able, within their abilities, if you're able to act, then act. If you're able to call out your government for their complicity, then call them out and act on it. If you're able to speak to your colleagues, your family, your community members about what's going on in Sudan, speak on it. And always, of course, pray for us and our people, but act and speak first, and then pray.
Wow. Hey, Sister Suad, thank you so much. And come back again, please. Come back again to update us. Come back again to enlighten us more on this Sudan issue. And I'm really praying for your family, and I pray that the thousands of people watching this will do the same, because we are one African family.
Mm.
We are one African family. That's what Pan-Africanism is all about. And I know a lot of African Americans are watching me, a lot of Africans in Jamaica, a lot of Africans even here, Kenyans. My audience is so diverse, and I pray that as they're watching this, they support Decolonize Sudan.org. They pray for you guys, and let's make this Sudan issue at the front line of, because whenever we think about oppression, we think about Palestine, we think about Ukraine, we think about all these other groups, and we should fine. But my idea is that we need to solve our problems as African people first, and maybe we can think about other people. So let's speak about Sudan. Free Sudan, free Congo, free Somalia, free Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rina, and I really can't wait to continue conversation with you. Very much enjoyed the time, and would love to come back anytime to speak again.
Yeah, and I want to let people know that next week I'll be talking to Ahmed for the second time. It will be the second interview. Ahmed is a very good friend of mine, and I really want to focus on this Sudan issue. I really want to put a lot of intensity into this, because few people are really putting a lot of intensity into this.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you.
I'm very
you so
much looking to watching the conversation with Ahmed. He is a very I look up to Ahmed a lot, and A lot of his work with Africa Stream is you know, a lot of what mobilized me and educated me about a lot of Pan-African issues. So really looking forward to seeing that conversation.
Wow, thank you so much, thank you. Here in Kenya we say asante or shukran. I know shukran is in, so we say asante and shukran. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ordino. Take care.